Good morning. Please have a seat. I think I got through the hardest part. I got up here without falling. So I'm John Nibbelin, and I want to just state that I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here with you in St. Paul's in this beautiful space this morning to share some of my experiences with Kairos prison ministry. I've known Joan Cleary for several years now, dating back to when she was the administration director at First Presbyterian Church here in Burlingame, where I'm a member. Joan and I were having lunch a few months ago with Pastor Sarah, and we started talking about the role of mission work in sort of Christian life and in the life of the church. And Pastor Sarah invited me to come and share with you some information about my participation in Kairos. And I was, thrilled to agree. Of course, that was a few months in the past, and it seemed safely, off, and here we are today. So, on the cover of the Kairos program manual, which is basically the curriculum for the prison ministry that I'm involved in, there's a quote from the 25th chapter of the book of Matthew, and it says that, I was in prison and you visited me. Actually, I've got the Spanish version of it. It's estuve en la cárcel y me visitaron. So I looked at that, and I was thinking to myself, my dad was a Presbyterian chaplain in the Army, and I was pretty familiar with this particular part of the Bible. In addition to the mandate to visit prisoners, it speaks to feeding the hungry, giving water to the thirsty, clothing the naked, welcoming strangers. In my walk over the years, I guess I sort of considered this kind of an optional laundry list of good things to choose from. And I've really been attracted over my life to ministries focused, for example, on housing and feeding those in need. That seemed a lot more worthy to me than working with inmates. In fact, I really wanted nothing to do with the incarcerated. And if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I would have assured you that I'd never get involved in prison ministry. Growing up, the person who was most dear to me was my older brother, Owen. He was always looking out for me, made sure I didn't get bullied. He was just a caring and nurturing older brother. When he was 19, my brother Owen was shot at a party by someone he didn't know who was apparently upset with someone else who was at that party. My brother nearly died that night, and he was left paralyzed from the waist down. The guy who shot my brother was sentenced to 10 years in state prison, which at the time struck me as kind of grossly inadequate, frankly, considering the harm that my brother had suffered and the way that my brothers, my parents, our whole family's, kind of lives were sort of turned upside down and dramatically changed. My brother lived almost 20 years after that event, but he died before his 40th birthday due to the medical complications that, sort of were related to that shooting. I have another brother who also passed away too young. He was an addict. And because of his addiction and the crimes that he committed to feed that addiction, he spent most of his adult life in prison. And I know this was really devastating for my parents. They were worried, they were embarrassed, and about the course that my brother's life had taken. And it really offended me and made me angry the way my brother had sort of imposed this kind of trauma and heartache on my family and my parents. And largely because of these experiences, I carried a lot of bitterness and anger and resentment towards the incarcerated. And I have to say, in my own mind, I would have been a terrible candidate for prison ministry. And I guess that's where God stepped in. He was working through one of my friend's spiritual mentors at church, a guy named Rick Kell, who actually came to the 8 o'clock service and heard me talk about this. Rick and I served on church committees together, and we have some things in common. We're both Army veterans, and we both served in the military police corps. I like and respect Rick a lot, and I could see how Jesus was moving in his life. At some point, he started telling me about his work with the Kairos prison ministry, and he suggested that I might consider getting involved. And like I was saying, this is not something I had any intention of doing, so I politely put off his suggestions and his requests. But for whatever reason, every few months, Rick would come back and tell me more about Kairos and just keep planting that seed. Finally, at one point, Rick told me that his brother, Bill, was going to lead a Kairos team and that Bill wanted me to be on that team. After all this asking, I figured if I just agreed this one time, it would be behind me. I'd do it and that would be that. So I did say yes. And, that saying yes has really changed my life. I want to turn now to the Kairos Prison Ministries itself. It's a lay-person-led Christian ministry that's focused on meeting the needs of incarcerated persons and their families. It's ecumenical, so I've had the joy in the course of this work to sort of interact with volunteers from many different denominations, including Episcopalians, Catholics, Baptists, Presbyterians, all sorts of stripes of non-denominational Christians. We work together and we stay focused on what all these denominations share in common. In particular, the universality of God's forgiveness, the redeeming love of Jesus Christ, and the building of Christian community. We leave to the side our theological differences, sort of denomination to denomination. Again, the goal of Kairos is to share the love and message of forgiveness of Jesus Christ. Kairos is active in several countries, in most of the states of the Union, and 14 prisons here in California, including at San Quentin. All Kairos volunteers must be Christians. It is a Christian ministry, but the ministry is open to all incarcerated people without reference to their religious beliefs, to their gender, to their race, to their ethnicity. As I was mentioning, I participate in the Kairos Council at San Quentin, and I thought I would share a little bit about how the ministry works there. The program's pretty standard, and a Kairos weekend is going to look pretty similar institution to institution, although there are some minor differences. Kairos began at San Quentin back in 1989, and the ministry has gone on continuously since that time, although we did have a break there for a couple years owing to COVID, where we couldn't go into the prison. Twice each year, a Kairos weekend retreat takes place. One retreat over the President's Day weekend, and the other is over the Labor Day weekend. The program runs Thursday to Sunday of the long weekends, and it's run in close coordination with the prison chaplain's office and the prison warden's office. And months before the weekend, we submit to the chaplain and to the warden a very detailed narrative of the weekend program. We talk about all the proposed activities, the people we anticipate participating, all the materials we're going to need, and what kind of support we're going to need from the prison. So it's a very detailed it's almost like planning a military exercise or something. You got to get that information in and have it all approved before you can actually go in and do it. And good relations with the prison administration are essential. When you're operating a prison, having a bunch of folks come in from the outside, in addition to being a disruption to operations, it poses a security risk. So we work very hard on, cultivating a good relationship with administration. At San Quentin, we come in for each retreat weekend with approximately 40 volunteers, and we typically have 40 or so San Quentin residents who participate in the program. We spend many hours each day inside of the prison, mostly in the chapel. We don't go into the cell blocks, but we do have the experience of entering the prison through the large steel doors at the front, and it is kind of a disconcerting experience to hear that steel door shut behind you when you're going in. If you've never experienced that before, it's pretty visceral. We also have the opportunity to eat with the inmates in the prison dining facility, and these facilities are massive. Again, I've spent a lot of years in the military, and I'm used to these very large dining facilities, but this is among the largest dining facilities I've ever been in. Before the weekend starts, this group of volunteers, these 40 volunteers who are going in, will have met 5 or 6 Saturday mornings for a team formation. And this team formation includes orientation to the Kairos program for people who've never done it before. We brief on all the institutional rules. The prison's got a lot of rules, what you can bring in. Very little, maybe your car key and an ID. Nothing else goes in. No chewing gum, no Tic Tacs. Just going in with very little. What you can bring out, which is nothing. You can only bring out what you brought in. Sometimes, we have inmates who ask us to take out messages to other people. It's very clear we can't do that. There's a whole process of applying for security clearances. There's a whole bunch of rules around dress codes. The color I'm wearing today, I couldn't wear into the prison. Blue is the color that inmates wear, so no blue clothing, no clothing with logos. So we spend a lot of time, dealing with those kinds of rules. And most importantly, we're praying and growing together as a Christian community. We're planning out how we are going to, do this weekend, but we're trying to build Christian community among the 40 of us so that we can go in and, share community. If you have any experience with the Cursillo movement, you'll have a general sense of the flow of a Kairos weekend. Kairos is generally an attempt to take the Curcio program and adapt it to the prison setting. And the day moves, the 4 days that I was talking about move through a fairly logical progression. The first day is really focused on introductions and getting participants comfortable and building rapport. The second day is focused on encountering and knowing yourself and where each of us are with God and his forgiveness for each of us. You move on to the third day, and it's really about encountering and getting to know Christ, his body, the church, and learning to forgive others. And the last day is about encountering others and beginning the process of growing in faith and in community with others. Each day consists of a series of activities, including talks and meditations led by team members, as well as music and prayer and table conversation. Volunteers from the outside and participants from the inside sit together at tables of 8 people, usually a couple people from the outside and maybe 5 or 6 people from the inside. And that's really the core of the program, is those table conversations and the building of community there. We usually have at least 1 or 2 tables for people who speak Spanish. We have a number of people who participate on the inside who are primarily or exclusive Spanish speakers, and that's something we've seen really increase over the last several years. And I think something that we try to bear in mind and throughout the team formation in each Kairos weekend is that we're really not there to preach at people. We're really there to share Christ's unconditional acceptance and love. And our mandate at its core is to listen, listen, love, love. That's kind of our mantra. We're there to listen and to love. And I think that the sharing of unconditional acceptance and love is the most powerful thing about Kairos. And in my experience, it's the key to the program's effectiveness. The weekends are only the beginning of the Kairos experience for participants, though. The point of the program is to build Christian community inside the prison and to empower our brothers to build and sustain that kind of community through formation of small groups inside the prison and again, that sort of ongoing community and communication among them. We come back as outside volunteers once a month for reunions with our brothers on the inside at San Quentin. I think a wonderful thing about the ministry is that you don't have to go into the prison to participate. Throughout each Kairos weekend, we share items of agape with the participants. Agape is a Greek word, and it refers to the form of love that embodies selflessness and unconditional care for others. The agape that we share with program participants includes posters that people have taken and colored and written encouraging messages on. Every Kairos weekend has its own theme. Kairos 59, which is going to happen in February, next month, there at San Quentin. Their theme is Walking with Jesus, and you can see the little poster that they've put together. I actually sent to Pastor Sarah some posters that you all could maybe, if you chose to, color, and we can make sure that these get to the guys on the inside. Another item of agape that we share with inmates is that we take the entire weekend and we divide it into half-hour blocks on a big chart, and we give people like yourselves, like myself, the opportunity to sign up for a half hour of prayer during that time, and we let the participants know that there are people all over the world who are praying for them during the entire course of the weekend. And that's a really powerful message that we send as well. And it's not really possible for me to overstate how much impact this agape has on the men who receive it. I know a lot of guys who I've met in there have got children sometimes of the age of the people we ask the kids that we ask to color these things. And sometimes we have seniors who color these things and write encouraging messages. And a lot of these people are estranged from their kids or their parents, and they haven't received something tangible, from somebody on the outside for a long time. So this is a really powerful thing that has moved some people to tears, as I've witnessed. I did want to conclude with a couple of reflections. First, it's absolutely the case that Christ is present and moving in San Quentin. We know that there's nowhere you can go where you are separated from the love of God in Christ. And taking yourself to an unfamiliar or uncomfortable place helps to make that point real and really is bring it home. I'd also want to note that it's not just our brothers residing at San Quentin who are transformed by Kairos. I've been thinking about how to explain the way I've been impacted by this work, and it came to me relatively recently, within the last week and a half or so, while I was exercising and listening to a podcast. This podcast that I was listening to featured an interview by Father Greg Boyle, who some of you may know. He's a Catholic priest, and he helped to found Homeboy Industries, which is a nonprofit that works with gang members and former gang members down in Southern California. Father Greg said something during this interview that really struck me. To paraphrase, he observed that God does not send us to folks at the margins so we can make a difference, although maybe we do make a difference because God moves there at the margins. He doesn't send us there so we can make a difference. Rather, he sends us to the margins so that those that we meet at the margins can make us different. We go there so that we can be made different by the people we meet at the margins. And that's certainly what happened to me. I think it's notable that in this morning's reading from the book of Acts, while everyone in that story experienced God's presence, it was not the prisoners, Paul and Silas in particular, who had their lives transformed by this miracle that's described in the story. Rather, it was the man who was not incarcerated, the jailer, who had his life totally turned upside down and transformed. I've had my life transformed by the men who I've met in Kairos. I've been able to move from a place where I have stereotyped and to an extent written off from fellowship with me, incarcerated persons. And I've seen that these people I've met are beloved children of God, as worthy of forgiveness and fellowship as anyone else. The program emphasizes that God's love and forgiveness through Christ Jesus are for everyone, and that because we are forgiven, we should be doing the ongoing work of learning to forgive others. In fact, I found that by forgiving others, we increase our joy and we broaden our communities. Again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of these thoughts this morning, and I hope that some of you might consider joining us in this Kairos ministry.